This week, Carlos Perez, research team lead at TrustedSec, joins us to discuss penetration testing and adversary emulation. In the security news, you got so many CVs, you need your own dedicated vulnerability scanner. Melting your neighbors with hacking. The FDA's SBOM and OSS. When the vulnerability scanner has a vulnerability, violating CISA directives at scale, making 2FA a little easier with this little device that was hacked together. NSA's Black Lotus Mitigation Guide. Who needs those certificates anyhow? All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly. This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. When organizations face poor web performance, challenges building modern applications at scale, or need to reduce operational and development costs, they turn to Fastly. Fastly's distributed edge network means your business can unleash its growth potential without worrying about scaling your infrastructure, whether growth of users, transaction volume, or geographic expansion. Get the speed, security, and edge cloud innovation you need to deliver profitable and engaging experiences. Visit securityweekly.com/Fastly for more information or to speak to an expert.
Hey, welcome to the show. I'm not in the studio. I was there last week, but I am out in my man cave and enjoying a beautiful evening. Have a cigar, have a cocktail, and I would love to introduce you to Paul Asadorian, who's actually been here finally after 9 years. Take it away, Paul.
Welcome, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly, coming to you in super low definition compliments of Darth Vader himself. It is episode number 789, being recorded on June 28th, 2023, right here in G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island. Jeff, thank you for that introduction. It was good to be out at the cabin. Fun times.
Good times.
I have a special guest here in studio, as well as Jeff remotely from the cabin. Jack Gesowich is here with us. Jack, welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be back.
For those who don't know, Jack, I call him like he's my pseudo nephew. We agreed, like, it's just complicated.
Yeah, totally.
Pseudo nephew is, if you don't fully understand it, it's fine because it takes too long to explain.
Just accept it.
Just accept it. It's fine. Jack was also worked here for a while, actually. Doing some programming stuff. Awesome. Which was a lot of fun. Jack, we had way too much fun together, dude.
Those were great times.
Great times.
Cool software, cool projects, fun. Yeah.
What are you doing today? I feel like, I don't know, today you're kind of like...
It's just like a little bit
of this, little of that.
A little bit all over the place.
Some cryptocurrencies.
Did some crypto stuff, some venture investing for some venture capital funds. And been spending a lot of time in DC, actually, doing a variety of like policy things lately, actually.
It's awesome, man.
Yeah,
it's awesome.
It's cool.
Well, thanks. It was like a last minute thing.
No, it was great.
Thanks
it
for
worked
joining
out
us.
really well.
Yeah.
I'm glad to be here.
Remotely, Mr. Josh Marpet. Josh, welcome.
Well, welcome. Happy to be back, bringing the hat out of retirement, having a great time. Let's do some talking.
I love the hat. I missed the hat. I'm glad you brought it back. Mr. Tyler Robinson is here with us. Tyler, welcome back, man. You were on hiatus there for a little while. You've been busy. I get it.
It's been an adventure as usual, but yeah, good to be back. Glad to see you guys again. I missed your face.
Didn't even
have time for that.
How is the Ukraine this time of year, Tyler?
It's
you wouldn't
great.
know, right?
I wouldn't know. I'll have to check.
Couple of quick announcements before we get into it. To make sure you subscribe to the Below the Surface podcast by Eclipsium in partnership with the Cyber Risk Alliance. Myself and Scott Shefferman host this show. We've had the pleasure of speaking with amazing guests, including Zeno Kova, founder of Open Source Security Training 2, and Richard Hughes, the founder of the Linux Vendor Firmware Service. You can find all of the episodes at eclipsium.com/podcast and subscribe using your favorite podcast catcher. Follow Sec Weekly on Twitter for live stream reminders, highlighted clips, and more. With us today is Mr. Carlos Perez, former co-host right here on the Paul Security Weekly podcast. He's been active in the security community for over 20 years, contributed to multiple open source projects such as Metasploit and DNS Recon, at conferences such as DEF CON, DerbyCon, and HackCon. He is a frequent speaker and instructor. When not at a conference, Carlos is emulating malicious actors and 3D printing. Carlos, welcome back to Security Weekly. What's up, man?
Hey, Paul. Happy to be back. It's been a while.
It has. It has. I guess, Carlos, start I don't know. You want to share your journey of how you got into information security? Because it's been so long. I don't know that you haven't even done that on the show, or it's buried in the archive somewhere. In any case,
yeah, it's buried.
Carlos,
it's buried in the archive.
Share with us how you got your start, man.
Even before I joined the crew at Security Weekly, I remember it was when I was writing a bunch of interpreter scripts for you guys. When you had the forum, and that's a long time ago.
It was.
So I started actually working for the local government in security and IT. And that's kind of like my official start when it comes to the professional side. When it comes to the scene itself, it was actually back in college. Back in the days, with some friends, I joined a club, and they were freaking and getting long-distance calls free from the Puerto Rico telephone company so we could connect to BBSs back in the late 90s. So I actually started freaking in the late 90s, and then professionally in 99, I started working for the local government. After that, I joined Digital Systems, then Compaq acquired Digital. Then I was a contractor for Microsoft for a while, working also security for Microsoft Consulting Services back then. Then after that, Hewlett-Packard. Then from Hewlett-Packard, Tenable Network Security, where I worked with you over there, and now at TrustedSec. So it's been a long journey all around, from designing data centers and securing those data centers, including all of the networking, to securing Microsoft networks, pen testing, red teaming, tool development, government contract work, Marine Corps instructor. I'm a Marine Corps auxiliary, so I have been an instructor for Mar4 Cyber. Great bunch of guys. It's been a long journey, actually.
It's awesome. It's awesome, man.
So, Carlos, when you say you work for the local government, I mean, you live in a foreign country, don't you?
I worked
touchy subject, Jeff. Touchy subject.
Oh, you are so evil,
it's
bastard.
a territory of the United States in the Caribbean.
A conquered country.
I remember the year at DerbyCon where they wouldn't let you walk through 4th Street Live because they looked at your ID and they said, sorry, no foreigners allowed.
Yeah, they were asking for proof of citizenship. I told them I'm a U.S. citizen, and they went like, no, we need proof of citizenship. And I'm like, I'm Puerto Rican, and Puerto Ricans are U.S. citizens. And he was going like, no,
he was like,
not.
no, you have an accent. You're not. You're not from around here. That's terrible. It's terrible.
Good time. I mean, bad times. Bad times.
So,
To
Carlos,
be fair, this is Kentucky we're talking about. So.
yeah, it's true. It's true.
Yeah, but it has actually happened even in San Francisco, of all places.
Wow.
To be fair, this is San Francisco, California we're talking about.
Well, true. That's a crazy part of California. Yeah.
Go ahead. Name any place in America, and Tyler's going to say, to be fair,
Right.
you're talking about America.
Yeah.
So, Carlos, what do you do today for TrustedSec? Tell us about your journey at TrustedSec.
I'm the research lead for the research team. So I'm in charge of a bunch of guys, are smarter than myself, who write all of the tooling that gets used by our red team. So we write all of our different implants. In addition to that, we do provide implant training to certain government agencies. We assist the red team. We assist the force, which is our pen test team. And also we work closely with our incident response team, aiding them in different cases. So we do from reverse engineering, tool development, and technical advisory internally in support of the other teams.
It's
Okay, so it's
interesting.
a lot of time on Midjourney, right? A lot of time on Midjourney finding Dave's next tattoo.
No, actually, yeah. With Dave is Dave.
Dave is Dave.
Actually, we spend more time just looking at his pictures of him lifting weights and everything. We actually did a joke. We actually created an OnlyFans account of him, name Hacking Buff, and we were debating making it public or not as a joke. And then we went like, "No, we like our jobs. Let's not do it."
I
But
mean,
Give
I
me
would
the
have given you
creds.
some
I'll
mad
make it
props if
public.
you made C2 out of the public profile using the OnlyFans as C2.
yeah.
That would be amazing.
All right. I think we've got a consensus here. Carlos, hand over the
Yep.
creds to Tyler and myself. I will happily make it public officially. Tyler will make it a C2 center locus, and you guys are fine.
And you won't be blamed because nobody will know.
That's right.
Yeah,
It's not
exactly.
like anybody watches a show or
Yeah,
something.
right. We're just chatting. Carlos, there was a time though when I feel like we used a lot of publicly available tools for
Yes.
pen testing in C2, and it seemed like at some point, I want to say when like the defenses got advanced enough to consume what was readily available and have detections for it, that we just kind of went, if you're serious about this, you got to create your own stuff. Is that kind of like what's that arc kind of look like in your mind?
That was around 6 years ago. Actually, Microsoft was one of the first ones that started actually just looking at all of the public tooling. And as we published, they got very involved in the community itself around 7 to 8 years ago. And then around 6 years ago, we started seeing that they created multiple teams across the globe that were constantly looking what was being posted in social media, who was tagging who, and just building detections for a lot of the attacks that were happening for Windows Defender. It wasn't very good detections, but it was a start where they started looking at it. Then we started seeing other vendors started doing this. CrowdStrike is one of the good ones until one.
Because you got to be at least better than Windows Defender if you're
Yes.
an EDR company.
Yes. And in fact, for a lot of EDR companies, the AV side is an afterthought.
Yeah.
EDR was never meant to be something to block an attack. It was for you to detect and respond. And then customers were going like, but yeah, we want more detections. And they start using or implementing a lot of the technologies that AV products had. They added signatures. They added their own machine learning stuff. And now it's getting a lot better with the scale that some of these vendors have. One of the things they're doing is that they're gathering all of this data, looking at normal behavior and implementing that. If you properly tune and properly set up your EDR, they tend to be very good. They tend to be a pain in the butt when we're operating and trying to emulate an attacker, which is good. That's the purpose of them.
Right.
So yeah, at Trusted Set, we have around 3 different internal frameworks. One of them is the most popular one that we use. And yeah, the guys, we spent quite a lot of time implementing stuff into it. And part of our advantage is that being internal, being to us, it's not signatured as something very common. What we see is that when you look at an EDR product, when you look at an AV product, and we saw this at Tenable when we worked there with vulnerabilities. Vulnerability scanners don't cover all vulnerabilities. They cover the most common ones that we see products out there. And there's this large plethora of vulnerabilities that don't get addressed or then don't get coverage or detection. Same thing happens in terms of tooling and attacks. If the attack is very popular, if the tool is very popular in social media and being used by multiple actors, multiple pen testers, and the more they tweet about it, the more they post about it, the more noise they make out there in social media about it, it garners the attention of all of these vendors and they start adding detections to it. Some of them are going to be initially very crappy because they have a gigantic backlog. But then as it gets used more and more and people start adapting it, they then come back and improve upon that.
I feel like I worked on Trevor C2 a little bit, which was Dave and Company's open source C2 framework that was probably like just after he he published that he was like, we need to probably keep this stuff internal. I sent him some fixes for that and stuff, and it's a great framework. But again, it kind of suffers from when it's out there in the open, everyone can go build detections for it.
The internal joke at the company is not to tell Dave about stuff.
Yeah.
That's the internal joke. For example, when it was at the with the Trimark guys, we use code names for everything. All of my guys are ex-agency, so everything has a code name. And we've kept all of those code names internal so far until that date, about 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, I think. And they've decided to text like, hey, ask him about this, this, and this, and this, and this. And you could see me kind of blushing and going like, oh, man, my guys are going to have a heart attack. So, yeah, we do keep it quiet. And also, coming from our experience working with the government, we also have burn down processes. If the tool gets taken by somebody else, like let's say one of our operators fails to do cohabitation in a host and somebody else is able to steal our full agent, we have burn down processes on JAR rules that we're going to make public. How are we going to publish the source code to just burn the tool down so it's not used maliciously? That's
I gotcha.
Part of our backup plans that we have.
Well, I mean, yeah, because you are putting these on systems that conceivably other people have access to, and on networks that other people are monitoring. So, I mean, eventually something is going to get out there too. Also, I think your code words also kind of serve as beacons as well. If you hear people referencing a C2 piece of software with your code name, then you know it's been burned.
So thankfully, when we look at the strings of all of our different tools, there's pretty nothing there.
Yeah, that's good.
We do take a approach to how we design our implants. So typically we have what we call a scout, a initial payload that goes in that has very basic functionality. So we see it just like attack detection. In our case, we just see it as our detection surface. Instead of our attack surface, is our detection surface. How large is our detection surface? The more APIs, the more stuff we put into that initial scout, the more stuff is going to look off. In addition to that, if we make it super lean, super elite, it's going to stand out. A lot of people write crappy software, large binaries. So if you have a 100K, 168K binary that is very lean with very few APIs, it's going to look off.
Yeah. So it's about blending in. That's really interesting.
Yeah. It's like
Sorry, quick question for those of us that haven't pen tested in a while, and for others that don't do it. Could you briefly describe or define what you mean by C2?
Yeah, C2 is our command and control. So typically we refer to our server as a C2 and then as a C2 channel. How do we communicate with that control plane? So that's going to be one or more servers where the operators connect to and they receive the connections from the different implants that get put on the machines. At different stages, we can have one single C2, which is how we normally operate depending on the maturity level of the target. If the target is a very mature target that has very good controls, we're going against a target that has a SOC. We may have multiple C2 servers that the operators operate from, and our payloads are coded in a way that they can shift or switch channels in addition to C2 infrastructure to be able to hide and adapt to the controls that the target may have.
In this sense, though, because I think, Carlos, some people may be thinking like, well, why did teams create their own tools and never release them? Shouldn't they release them so we all know how to respond to them? But I think in your role and what Trusted Sec in this case and others are providing is true adversary emulation. We're running under the assumption that real malicious actors also have their own tradecraft and you have to defend against it, right? So we're kind of, it's truly emulating an attacker.
Yeah, and not only that, we don't operate 100% with our framework. It all depends on the level of the target, what we want to emulate. We will use Cobalt Strike if it calls for it. We will use other C2 frameworks, open source frameworks out there, if it calls for that. For typically, our internal frameworks are used by our red team, so those typically are three-month engagements that we operate in, where we're doing both the physical and then the digital side together. And in those cases, is that because our framework allows us stuff that we can do that Cobalt Strike doesn't allow us. For example, there was one engagement where the host had a tuned EDR, which was surprising. It wasn't a next and a reboot. It was somebody that actually went in and tuned the environment. And we were also seeing auditing rules that were there, and they were chipping logs. So it wasn't only the EDR. They had other layers of mitigating controls. So that affected our operational tempo and tools.
Right.
A lot of people don't realize this, but a defender controls two important things for the attacker. One of them's the tooling, the other one's the tempo. How fast do we move? Because the more controls you have, the more limited we are in the tools, and the more we have to test in the lab, validate that we can bypass all of those controls and not get detected. In addition to that, that takes time, and sometimes just being fast means that we can get detected. So by having our internal framework, in that case, what we did is we had access to an IP phone. So one of the red team operators came to us and they asked, hey, Carlos, can your team help us here? So we joke that we have a Kevin, which is one of our senior developers that actually is a brilliant guy when it comes to implant development. So he recompiled and modified our agent to work inside of that phone for that specific MIPS processor. And we were able to inject it into the same version of firmware that we found out the phone was using. Then late that night, we actually injected or we upgraded the phone with our new firmware and implant, and then we just move our operation to that device. We've also done it to 3D printers. We've done it to control software for automated systems, where we have seen that they're running a special version of Unix or Linux, and given how we have coded parts of our implants, we've been able to just get that specific version, look at what are the dependencies, recompile our implants for that.
I'm glad to hear you say that, Carlos. I just want to inject for a moment about how excited that makes me, because I think for a long time, it's probably still true today for most, we always said that these devices, I'll just put the generic term devices, right? Like, it's not a PC server or a laptop in this case. It's something else, could be used as a jumping off point. And I think we're beating that drum for a long time. And I think from the defender side, they were kind of like, well, I've never seen an attack like that. But now what you're describing in your engagements, you are utilizing those attacks.
Yes.
And that's probably not everyone, but it sounds like it's more than it used to be.
Yeah, in fact, you were one of those that was beating that drum with IoT.
Oh, yeah.
Printers. 10 or more years ago, and printers and stuff like that. We've actually gotten, in fact, one of my guys is anxious for us to get access to a multifunctional that we can just recompile our implant and get it running in one of those. But we've been in IP cameras, we've been in phones, we've been into control systems. We've been in multiple places inside of the network. Networking devices are fun. F5, ESXi servers.
Oh, yeah.
One of my guys, that's his specialty, actually writing implants for embedded devices in his previous job. So we have the knowledge how, if we need to then write implants for routers, for switches, if it's called upon.
Yeah, my coworker. You must know my coworker Nate Warfield.
Yes.
Yeah, but because he did a presentation about F5 persistent implants. I don't know if that was a presentation or blog. I think he did a presentation on it. It was definitely a blog post because I edited it for him, and I was like, dude, that's awesome.
I call him the Viking. So yeah, I remember when I started.
Wait, why do you call him the Viking? Now I need to.
Where his red beard?
It's not because of his beard.
Yeah,
I was just curious. I mean, now he kind of does look. Now I'm gonna have to get him a Viking hat. But anyway, continue.
Yeah. So In fact, I still remember Lord of the Rings. I was going to say that it was like the dwarf, and then go like, nah, he was badass, but yeah, the strategy.
Gimli! Gimli! He's Gimli! Come on.
So I
There's
remember
already a
started,
Gimli.
yeah, when I started at Trusted Sec, there was this customer which had everything very well buttoned down, and one of our guys was actually able to abuse the MDM system and get to provision a phone. And then through the phone, we were able to then move into the F5 devices, and we kept that channel of communication from the F5 to the phone to us in terms of having access. And all of that was done through multiple devices. I remember that was about 5 years ago that we did that. So it is one of those avenues where we still see a lot of people don't cover. Like you talk about Windows, and a lot of people have all kinds of applications, blinky boxes, and all kinds of stuff. And then you go over to Linux, for example, and they say, no, I have Windows Defender for endpoint with static signatures that don't work. Or I have this other product over here, which doesn't work either. Linux is still my favorite. Like if we get access to Linux, either embedded or in a server, we're golden. 99.8% of the targets don't even have auditing enabled. And it's kind of sad. I've been in IRs where we've been told like, hey, this Linux server got hacked. We start looking at it, and then we find another actor.
Yeah.
And then an actor.
Well, because you know what? You know what I found too, Carlos? And this jives kind of what you're saying. So I'm imagining you're going to be on the same page with me. That when I do incident response on Linux, attackers don't go through lengths to cover their tracks because no one's really looking.
No one's looking.
Well, like you didn't even
People
make an
don't know
effort.
how to look.
Yeah,
and
Like, they did-
and this is where I see a difference between the private sector and the government sector. The government sector puts so much effort into stealth, so much effort. Like it's mind-boggling. You want to hit your head against the table in terms of processes for OPSEC. And then when you look at the target, they have no auditing, they have no AV, and you're going, why do I still need to triple keyboard check to just hit enter on the keyboard? So yeah.
Why am I giving them a college exam when they haven't even passed kindergarten?
Some things haven't changed over the years.
Like,
Carlos,
seriously, Jeff, I mean, how many times have you been to a company where they weren't even past kindergarten yet?
But well, there's that. But I also want to with Linux, right?
Most.
WSL is that an valid attack vector? We were talking about some of that stuff and like what is it stealthier and does it give you enough
stealthier
privilege?
Because it gets ignored. There's no AV inside of the hypervisor. It's a VM inside of the machine, so nothing is inspecting it outside of the shared storage that comes from it. Connections are tracked to a certain degrees, and the rules are not that good for it. So it is an enclave where you can live if you find it. I have to be honest, when we go out there, it's not common. It's like Sysmon. I've done an entire series of Sysmon. I have preached Sysmon to the 7 wins, and out of 10, 15 engagements, if we find it in one customer or two, and it's badly configured.
Yeah. Which it works on. Doesn't Sysmon work on Linux as well?
Yes.
Yes.
As somebody who has had to deal with Audit D, I love it. It's a blessing to be able to use Sysmon and have tracking of network connections, tracking of process being created, terminated with their own GUID, and all of that information. Which is
where do
really
you
nice
send it? Where's the best place to send it? I mean, in enterprise, you probably have multiple options, right?
Yeah, in the case of Sysmon for Linux, everything is in the syslog. So any application that can ship syslog logs over to a SIM or any other centralized place, you can use that. What I've seen is that same thing that we have been seeing with AVs is the same thing that happened with logs. People set up everything and they ingest a ton of stuff, but they don't write anything around it. In fact, they don't even get training for the people. Like,
they just collect it. They're like, we're collecting it. It's great.
And even not to crap on the industry, but a lot of managed security providers out there that manages different SIMs. One of the things that I've noticed is that they really don't detect that much, which is surprising. Like, I've been in a couple of engagements, I've seen a couple of reports and go like, oh, but they have an MSP. And then we are working IR and we look at the logs and yeah, here's the attack.
Right.
Oh, clear as day. Oh, here's another one. Oh, here's another one. It happened to even to a friend of mine. We did an engagement and he was telling me like, Carlos, our MSP say that they didn't see you. And I go like, go check the logs. We were noisy on purpose. Check the logs.
Still didn't find
and
you.
he went in and go like, oh yeah, I see you. Oh, even as a taunt, you did a connection on 4444 and go like, yep.
That should have.
And it didn't trigger an alert. Nope.
Wow.
Again, some things never change.
Yep.
Here's a
Hey,
Can I
I
jump
had a
in?
couple questions or comments, but good.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Somebody
Jeff.
else.
Jack and then Jeff.
It's a little bit of a segue, but you know, I've been checking out over the past couple weeks. Have you looked at like CISA's open source stuff at all?
Yes.
I haven't stood any of it up yet, but is it high quality compared to some of the industry tools that are out there?
It, in capable hands, it's good.
Okay.
It's very decent.
Okay.
Again, in capable hands. Like, if you have an EDR system and
Sure.
you're not writing your own rules, you're not in capable hands. If you're not tuning your EDR, like for example, every EDR that I know of, you want to bypass it, run.32 is the magic key.
Yep.
Default install. Why? Because we have this concept of friction. Same thing that happened with vulnerability management. You don't, and this is something that I fought tooth and nail with our product managers when I work at Tenable, working with vulnerability management. They go like, no, that causes too much friction for the customer. They're going to be angry. And I'm like, but it gives good detections. No, make it a parameter, a setting that they have to enable. I'm going, oh crap. So you ship a product that is good, but not as good as it can be, because you don't want to cause friction with that customer, that they go like, oh, this tool's giving me too many alerts, too many false positives. Yeah, but we're telling you about 10 things that are bad and one of them is a false positive. Yeah, but that still causes friction. That still causes problems with our customer. And that's why I've changed my tune when it comes to release of tools.
Yep.
After working a couple of IRs and seeing my tools being used at the other side, I was of the notion that by me releasing my tools open source and giving them out there, that people were going to improve. And then I've come to the realization after years that I was doing it actually for ego. And the other part was that people don't have a SOC team that is constantly in Twitter.
Well, that's the other thing. I was realizing, I was like going through, you know, the GitHub repositories of just CISA out there, and I'm like, holy crap, there's some like really interesting stuff here, and like high quality if you know what you're doing, and you know,
if you know what you're doing,
right, like they're not making it like one-click deployable, but like if you understand, you know, how to use AWS, and you know,
and that's why I always say that in the security field, it is a human problem and not a technology one.
Totally.
It's like being on a diet. Like, you want to get healthy, calories in, calories out. You exercise, you sleep well. Everybody knows that. It's been proven, but we don't do it. Same thing with security. You need to have buy-in. You need to know what are all of your assets. And I still remember having a friend of mine land in a base in South Korea for a actor that just penetrated some systems over there, and he and his team go into Air Force jets and they fly over there and they go running with their Humvees and all of their stuff and all of their equipment to aid in the defense of that network, which is kind of like funny, like, you know, the guys could do that shit remote, and go like, no, but we're so-and-so, we'll go there. And they land over there and start working, and the first thing they ask is like, okay, how many desktops, how many servers do you have? We think we have this amount. And the major goes like, what do you mean you think?
Think.
Instead
Carlos,
of
how many Carlos, how many organizations have you ever been to where they actually have an asset inventory?
I can count them with my left hand, and I'm missing fingers in my left hand.
I knew you were going to say that. I was going to ask something. Wait, hold on. Which hand, Carlos? Because this makes a difference.
He already said left hand. So,
Yeah.
I mean, you've sort of doubled back on one of my first questions I had back when you were talking about, publishing tools and, putting them in the hands of others and the detection and all that. I feel like, well, my philosophical question and what are your thoughts on, it seems like a lot of organizations would not be doing that to defeat real attackers. They would be doing all that to pass their scans and pass their pen tests rather than really looking for the adversary.
Check the box. Check the box.
Pen tests are a checkbox.
Yep.
Find me somebody that wants a pen test longer than 40 hours.
Right.
Almost every customer says, I want a 40-hour pen test.
Right.
Every customer wants that. A 40-hour pen test because we have a checkbox, which limits what we can do. We have to use tools that normally we would not use that way if we want to be stealthy, and still we get access, and still we get what we want. And the way I see it is, it's a human game of motivators. I remember for a very long time I used to hate salespeople. And then when I found out how they get compensated and how they get paid, and if they don't sell, they lose tons of money. And I go like, that's why they'll sell their mother, they'll lie, they'll do whatever they have to do to get a sale. It's how they get measured. Same thing happened. And then when I became a manager, it came to that same game. What are the goals that I'm setting every trimester for my guys that we need to hit? How am I evaluating them against those goals? It is depending how I measure them is how they behave. Same thing in security. Right now, how do we measure them? Have you had this amount of pen tests? Not if you've been able to block them. Have you been able to detect them? No. Have you had one yes or no? So they only want that checkbox.
Show me the incentives.
So real quick, sort of a little bit of a sidebar question, but Paul's on a theme of talking to pen testers. We were talking to, and I apologize, I forget her name from last week.
Emily St. Pierre.
Emily, thank you. I want to put a similar question to you. How does trusted sec define or delineate, especially your salespeople that are selling these services to your customers? What's the difference between a pen test and a red team exercise from a trusted sec perspective?
Well, when you talk, let's say that we're talking with Ryan, he's one of our best sales guys. When he goes into a customer, he tries to understand what the customer's actually trying to achieve and where he is at. And many times we'll even tell them, like, dude, you don't need a pen test. You don't need a red team. What you need is a vulnerability management or vulnerability assessment or even a process assessment, or just have policies in place. And I'll take you to another guy that can do this, or I think we can sell you this, but you should really get this other thing if you are really interested in the pen test. Typically, pen tests are 40 hours, 2 weeks, 3 week type of engagement. And we give you a report, and we try to do as much as possible inside of that window and test as many controls as we can during that window. And not every pen test is the same. Customers always tweak them, and we have different ROEs, different goals. So there's no cookie cutter way of doing it, but we do have kind of like several templates of the most common things that they may ask, so we can provide a quote as quickly as possible. When it comes to a red team, typically we sit down with the customer and we try to understand, are they trying to emulate a specific threat? What are they worried about? How does their business work? And that is when Ryan brings over our team lead for the red team. It brings over Justin Elsie from TrustedSec also in to validate the opportunity and try to guide the customer and understand what the customer wants. And then we scope out an exercise depending on what are the worries and what are the needs of the business that they have. So that pen test may include an assumed breach, and we don't do any of our phishing or social engineering, or we go like, okay, we're going to do social engineering, phishing, and then we can do assume breach to make sure that we cover all of our bases very well to provide you the most value possible. Or also we can do even a physical, or we can have David Boyd from the company go in and try to get in. And yeah, there are even some fun stories about when we do the physical side.
So real
always
quickly,
fun stories when it's physical.
real
pen
quickly,
testing.
Carlos, the phishing, social engineering, physical compromise. Typically, is that for TrustedSec, and not that it's right or wrong. Is that typically a pen test exercise, or is that typically a red team exercise when you're engaging in those types of activity?
Typically, physical, we see it more on the pen test side and short-term engagements. And also we do them in the red team side. We're starting to see them a bit more, depending on the size of the customer, maturity level of the customer, how far along are they in their journey at setting up the different controls and politics inside of the customer, actually. Even
So I'm trying to draw this out a little bit because, having been a pen tester, started doing it 30 years ago when all we called it was pen testing. I still find this fascinating, trying to learn the modern day terminology and the nuanced differences. So
Jeff, let's be clear. When you started, you were just testing pens because they didn't have computers yet.
Well, yeah, it was we were testing the types of ink that were used in the fountain pen or the quill. Thanks, Josh.
No problem. I'm sorry.
But I mean, I swear to God, I've had this conversation with others where what you're describing is parts of a pen test. They've said, well, no, that's a red team exercise. So, that's why I'm saying I don't think there is a right answer or a de facto answer. It's really
we go by duration, duration and complexity.
Duration.
Yeah,
generally speaking, the more mature organization is going to lean more towards a red team where it's specialized, targeted, focused, rather than just a shotgun blast, which would be a time-bound type of pen test.
Carlos,
exercise, correct?
Oh,
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
how deep do you guys usually go with physical security stuff? Right? How deep in terms of
They try to get to the CEO's bathroom.
Okay, interesting. Well, no, because
my guy will go in and he'll just start walking around and jiggling doors,
cool,
taking pictures, doing recon. It all depends on the target site. Sometimes he'll even rent a puppy, and go in on pet day.
No.
People look at the puppy, not him tailgating.
Yeah.
We'll go to different extents outside of.
Is there a preferred breed of puppy that's more effective?
What's most effective? That kind of attracting.
We will not blast even though Dave would love to do it. Blast with a shotgun a lock to get in, or hit a door with a sledgehammer.
So you follow the laws basically.
We follow the laws as close as possible, and sometimes.
In Texas, it's okay.
True.
Yeah, sometimes we do get stopped.
But don't encourage people, though.
We do get confronted.
Well, because I think the situation I was thinking of, that made me bring this up was, I was recently at an office out in California, and I'm not going to mention the name of the company, but they do some highly sensitive IP design around chips, right? Which is becoming increasingly important here in the U.S. as domestic manufacturing gets ramped up. You have the CHIPS Act. You have all these companies that are we're onshoring a ton of semiconductor stuff, right? And that IP is highly sensitive, right? And you have if you look at TSMC, all the guys overseas, spying's a huge problem over there. Do you guys work with a lot of IP sensitive companies, or is it mainly?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yes. And I wish I could share some of these stories. Even one of the recent ones, I wish I could share that, but yes, we've been able to.
I've heard some wild stories about TSMC, right? And the lengths they've gone through, because to fend off attackers, but also like I've heard stories about how you had people like in the ceilings and the factories over there.
In fact, one funny story is at one point, IT we were having problems with our Dropbox that we put in for our engagement for a Zoom breach, and our guy just simply went like, you know what, I'll fix it, and we're like, yeah, but the customer, our point of contact is not there. Oh no, I'll get in, I'll fix it. And he got into the data center, found our box, plugged it in, made the modifications, and got out.
And was there any detection?
Nope.
That's horrible.
Yes. And there have been times where IT has found our box, and they're keeping it, and they're doing an investigation, and he goes in, and he steals it back.
Nice. Wow, look at that. That's
Carlos, did you have a demo you wanted to show us about being stealthy with logs? Yeah.
I can do a demo. Yep.
It was your demo about basically covering your tracks?
Yes. In fact, it is a known not that known. Something that I typically teach in classes when I'm teaching about PowerShell and other things, and people just simply ignore it. Or
now, when you're doing,
like, wait, you can do this. And
one of the differentiators for me, though, when we talk about the different types of pen testing, we talk about this category called adversary emulation. Covering your tracks is part of that.
Yes. In fact, on a pen test, typically, given the maturity level of most customers that are getting pen tests, I don't even see Windows auditing. And many times when we even do a red team, sadly, it all depends on the size of the company, how it is structured, and under what regulations do they fall under, that you start seeing a blue team, a SOC team that go to trainings, that are able to develop their own stuff instead of just looking at grabs for different applications. So it will vary. That's why I see it more as a human managerial type of issue than a technology one, because I've seen the majority of the customers have great tools, great software, badly configured or not looked at or not used.
What size of company do you see the most issues in usually? In terms of like distribution?
Depends on who is measuring that company. Under what regulations do they fall under?
Hey, let me ask the question a different way, Carlos. I know that I don't know if Paul's aware of this, but Trusted Sec is a QSA company, so you have a certain number of clients that are PCI clients, and that's why they're doing the pen test. I'm gonna go out on a
Trusted Sex is a great name for that OnlyFans.
Agreed. I second that notion.
We do cloud, we do advisory, we do virtual CSO. There's a purple teaming, which I wish more customers did. Vulnerability management. In addition,
but I would wager Paul's salary for a week that most of your pen tests, most of your PCI customers are only signing up for a pen test unless they're really large level 1 merchant service providers.
Yep.
And I have no idea what
all depends how they're regulated and measured. So if they're getting regulated, they're large, and they're one of those that are at risk, you will see them buy more advanced services.
How do you get more proactive, like, get more organizations being proactive about it versus like, only pen testing because they have to?
It depends on, are we able to establish a good relationship with management, and also depends on the internal politics. And I'm going out here in the weeds. This is me, not Trusted Sec. It all depends on when I talk with people that are starting in security, or when I talk with managers are going like, but I want to do this and this and this, and they're not listening to me, and I'm getting angry. And I go like, that's your first problem. You got to build collateral with all of those managers.
Totally, internal trust, right?
Internal trust. So then you can cash in on that collateral to get stuff done. You need to learn how to influence. And go like, oh yeah, but I read all of these pen testing books. And go like, have you read Team of Teams by Stanley McChrystal? No. Have you read Extreme Ownership or the Leadership Field Manual by Jocko Willink? No. Have you read Demand the Mission to Me? No. Then you have a lot of reading to do, which is not technical, which is more strategic, which is more
it's tactical and like
people inside of the company, how to operate with others in a more dynamic type of environment.
This is something I've been thinking about. Have you? Because one leverage mechanism that I don't think is talked about enough, but I think you're starting to see more from the investment community. There, like a lot of investors are starting to pick up on the fact that they should encourage their companies to invest in, security, right? Because it's, they're losing money doing so.
And you have the carrot and stick. Now you have, for example, if you're in the crypto business, you're seeing every crypto company out there getting hit by the North Koreans.
Oh, one of my friends got hacked for $700 million.
Yeah, all of them are being hit. Like we're talking that it is 30% of the GDP of North Korea.
I mean, like North Korea is funding a lot of their operations with this stuff.
Yeah.
Well, they claimed Chainalysis thought that they got about $3 billion worth of crypto over the past, I think it's year and a half, something like that.
Yeah.
And that's a significant percentage of their GDP. Yeah.
Totally. I mean, it's a, I know most of the folks in that space, and it's a huge problem. And you look at the companies, like a lot of the companies managing. If you look at like the ratio between, the amount of money that's like in control by some of these companies or organizations relative to like the number of people they have on security or anything like that, compared to a traditional organization too, like just like in a regular enterprise software. It varies
inside of one single organization where the office is and what are the local laws that all of those employees are privy to.
But it's even worse than that, because most people don't understand this. A lot of the crypto companies are not even run from an office. They're they don't even seriously, like a lot of them are just like, it's like 5 guys running basically $900 million or something like that from their laptops, and they have no notion of security at all.
And we even see it with big companies. I remember one, and this one's not Trusted Sex, it's one specific engagement where the company had a branch somewhere in Asia and in the US, and the US team was going like, yeah, we want you to go over there in China, in this Asian country, and we want you to check our systems and our servers over there to make sure that we have been properly air gapped and there's no connections from one side to the other. The team lands over there, they start checking through everything, and they're able to do a DC sync, and they bring over everything from the domain controller, and they send it over to try to do a fast crack on their laptop for some stuff. Before they actually send it back to the office to their cracking cluster. And as he's just going like this on his chair and lifting up, boom, he gets a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And it's for the KRBTGT account, which you cannot change the password and set it to whatever you want. And he went like, what is this? And they start checking and checking and checking. And it turns out that that domain or that branch has been active since Windows 2000. And in Windows 2000, you could actually switch the KRBTGT account. In Windows 2003, they disabled that. So for a very long time, that was there, and they do their preliminary report to the local manager, and then they get asked to get out of the country.
Oh, of course.
Sorry, I hate to interrupt. Carlos, you were going to do a demo, and you kind of teased it.
Paul really wants to see the demo.
And you teased it as like, this is known but not really well known, which I find that there's a pretty hefty class of Windows type shenanigans, we'll call them, as an encompassing term, right?
And when you see it, it's going to be very simple, but when you think about it operationally, you're like, that's pretty neat. So I'm going to share my screen now.
Okay.
Here. So I'm sharing here a Windows machine. I'm running as administrator, so the user needs to be admin. So if we go here into the event log and I'm running as admin and I look, for example, WMI operational. A lot of people don't know that when you make a mistake in WMI, that gets actually logged. So where's WMI? See, I should have put on my glasses before I did this.
It's spelled WM. There you go.
Yeah. Here we go, WMI activity. And then when we look at an operational, when you have an error of a WMI query, it gets logged there. If I'm also adding a provider, it gets logged there. If I create a permanent event, it gets logged there. So there's a lot of stuff that I can do, from persistence to situational awareness to enumeration to persistence, that I can do via WMI. And all of that is here and it's enabled by default. So one of the things that I can do if I'm admin is, let's say I'm running PowerShell, I'm running .NET. This also works in C and C++. We've actually coded this in C at work. I can just get that event log for its configuration. So I can get WMI event, get win event. Sorry.
To clarify, Carlos, are you talking if your admin is the attacker or the defender right
As
now?
the attacker.
Okay,
So if I'm local admin on the machine, which happens way too often still.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
If I'm looking for this log, here's my log, Microsoft Windows WMI activity operational. Before I start doing all of my actions, one of the things I could do is I can grab this object that I'm getting back, which also works in .NET, because the object I'm actually working on is called System Diagnostic Event Reader Event Log Configuration. So MSDN actually gives you all of the properties and methods of what you can do here. And one of the properties is this log enabled? And one of the things that you can see is that I can set it to a specific part of the event log, not disable it all, but just that specific part. So I can just go here and I get my object. I can check my object if I want to. Do my log, get member, and I see that I'm working here with event log configuration, and I have a Boolean value here, which is enabled. And I can get or set that value. So I can modify it. So what happens if all of a sudden, let me clear this so we can see better the event. Right now, if I try to do a query and I'm doing enumeration on this target machine, and I do get WMI, Wing32, Lucas, something that doesn't exist, I'm going to get an error. And if somebody mistypes something, there was a typo that happened at any point, a good admin is going to notice that there was an error and there was a query that was mistyped. This should not happen in a production environment that is very well ran. Mm-hmm. So this is a telltale sign that somebody's running something in my machine that should not be happening. And this is operator error. How can I protect myself? So I grab this.
But Carlos, isn't a good admin relying on some sort of threshold in an event log or a monitoring tool that's going to issue an alert that happened?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I would say, but Carlos,
we have an error.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say, I think what you were saying is, if you have a server, people usually aren't typing PowerShell scripts directly in and getting WI command objects
or WMI queries.
Yeah, WMI queries, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yep. And it all depends on the size and expertise of the customer.
Right.
I remember at one time we were using WMI, and the only 3 customers that raised their hand and said, hey, there's something going on here. Your product all of a sudden started doing this WMI query, and it has a typo in, was MI5, NSA, and one small department at the DoD. Where the
Yeah,
only three ones
NSA.
that want like, oh, there's something happening here in less than 24 hours from where we push an update. So there are organizations that do check for this. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to set false. So I just set it to false. And also I have a method called save changes. So I can just do here, call this method, save changes. And I just disabled completely the WMI event log. So this event log here is disabled at this moment. So let's run that same query that had the problem. In fact, let me run it several times. And when we go over here, I can refresh as much as I want and nothing's there. So I'm going to do all of my WMI operations. I'm going to modify. I personally prefer to modify existing WMI permanent events than to create new ones. A lot of people check for for creation of new ones. I like just modifying existing ones. That's a technique that I learned from APT 28. And the other thing is I like using WMI providers where I can to just create that permanent backdoor on a machine. Now, the log here says disabled. So now I did all of my malicious stuff. I made all of my errors. I did everything that I wanted. I can just go here and enable this. And I can do this in C#. I can do it in C. I can do it in whatever language supports Win32 APIs.
In practice, would you typically re-enable it or set it again before you leave?
Yes.
Okay.
And we've done this to Sysmon, where we just go in and they're not using Windows auditing for process creation, process termination, and some other stuff, but there is Sysmon. And one of the things that we do is that this technique actually only works on modern versions of the event log, not the classic ones like security and system. So what we do is we just disable Sysmon, do all of our stuff that we need to do, and then we just re-enable it. Because I haven't personally found any solution out there that actually looks for when you have a gap in your logs. Oh, we didn't got any logs for the last 10 minutes.
Well, because that's hard to measure.
Or 20 minutes. Because it's hard to measure because people...
How would you do that?
Machines.
Would you be looking for basically like almost like mapping a time series of all the different logs and then looking for gaps?
Yeah, but
you would
I
have
think,
to be looking for some sort of behavior.
Right.
What's typical traffic, what's normal, and then you'd be looking for abnormal.
So you'd have to benchmark. You need like a segment of the log that you know for sure was normal as the benchmark.
But logs are never constant like that.
Sure, but like over if you have enough data, you can create a model.
Yeah, but the level of maturity that you need in that organization to be able to get the buy-in to implement that is very, very, very high. Mm-hmm. It is not one that I've seen where you go to a team and go like, hey guys, I want you to find gaps in our event logs. I want you to create an ML model that goes through all of this data, gets us the medium in terms of gaps that we get from traffic.
Yeah.
And then create alerts.
It's funny that
it would be prone to false positives, I think.
It's funny that you say this. Actually, I think I met a company about a month and a half ago that's actually doing something similar like this. I was at an Edge AI conference out in Santa Clara. I gotta look the company up. I forget, but they demoed me something that was doing actually something just like this. I'll have to find the company.
Cool.
Because what they were doing was basically
and sadly, a lot of good ideas die with product management.
100%.
You're not tainted from your Tenable days at all, Carlos.
I still remember when I won't mention that.
So good.
I didn't know.
Come on, you can tell Tenable stories. Tell the Tenable stories. Tell the Tenable stories.
No, I don't want to get sued.
Who's going to sue you? Ron's gone.
They're still litigious. No.
It was a good try.
Type it out. I'll tell the story.
It's a good try, Josh.
No.
Like just put in any open source project the word Nessus, and you'll be getting a letter.
A cease and desist.
Yeah. Yes.
Nice.
Well, they're
because they know to look for that.
Same thing goes for Qualys. The same thing goes for every company out there protecting their copyright and their IP. It is kind of like mandatory.
Yeah, you have to protect it.
You have to do it. So I do understand it. Doesn't mean I like it, but it's how the game is played.
It's just business.
Yeah.
It's just business.
Carlos, anything else you want to share with our audience today?
Well, I have a final question just on the demo. Is this just a feature, or is there a way to?
It's a feature of Windows that we can abuse. Typically, what I tell customers is to check for the registry changes inside of the different WMI event channels. So you're looking for the enabled value being set to a 1. So if all of a sudden you have enabled set to 1, it means that somebody has disabled one of your event logs, either via the UI or programmatically, and you should actually just look at why did that happen to that specific event channel. It's not normal. It's very abnormal. So far, I haven't seen any EDR catch this. I haven't seen any AV product catch it. I haven't seen any SOC actually catch it. And I've been teaching it for over 10 years in my PowerShell class. It is one of the demos that I teach my students, and still it doesn't get catched by anybody.
Well, hopefully, maybe it will now. Well, maybe not so hopefully, but.
Nope. We do include if used in an engagement, it will be in the report and how to monitor and how to detect it. So customers that do take report seriously and do implement all of those findings, they'll be covered.
Carlos, thank you very much for appearing on Pulse Security Weekly.
Hey, I'm happy to be back here with you guys. It's been way too long. I should have done this a long time before.
Great stuff. Yeah. Coming up
There's
next,
always a co-host seat for you.
That's Carlos, right. Always a home for you here at Pulse Security Weekly. Coming up next, the security news. Stay tuned.